When heat rises from the deep ocean, it does not stay confined to the water. It moves through the atmosphere, the soil, the crops, the food systems, and finally, into the human body. What begins as trapped energy in the sea ends as suffering in hospital wards and hungry households. The chain of impact is long but unmistakable. Each step in the process magnifies the next, creating a global feedback system in which human health becomes the final casualty of planetary imbalance. The ocean's role as Earth's thermal buffer has reached its breaking point, and now it is releasing that stored energy in ways that ripple directly into our veins, lungs, and stomachs. It starts deep below the surface, where decades of excess greenhouse heat have accumulated. The ocean has absorbed over 90% of the warming caused by human emissions, storing it silently in layers that we rarely see. When this heat resurfaces, whether through shifting currents, El Niño cycles, or disrupted circulation, it raises global air temperatures almost immediately. These bursts of oceanic heat are not gradual. They can trigger abrupt heat waves that blanket entire continents, pushing temperatures to lethal levels. In coastal cities, the combination of hot air and humidity from warmer seas creates wet bulb conditions where the human body can no longer release heat through sweat. The result is mass heat stress, emergency rooms filling with patients suffering from dehydration, kidney strain, and cardiovascular collapse. Power grids fail under the strain of cooling demand, leaving hospitals dependent on fragile generators. What started as energy trapped under the waves becomes human bodies collapsing on dry land. But the chain does not end with heatstroke. Oceanic warming alters weather systems, intensifying storms, droughts, and floods. These shifts destabilize the delicate systems that provide safe water. Heavy rains overwhelm sewage systems and wash pathogens into rivers and wells. Warmer, stagnant water becomes a breeding ground for bacteria like Vibrio and parasites that thrive in heat. Cholera, typhoid, and other diarrheal diseases surge after every flood or storm. The victims are often children, the elderly, and those in informal settlements where sanitation is weakest. Hospitals already overwhelmed by heat illnesses must now handle outbreaks of waterborne disease. The ocean's warmth has turned the hydrological cycle into a carrier of infection. As the ocean warms further, fisheries begin to collapse. Coral bleaching destroys marine nurseries, and the migration of fish toward cooler waters leaves traditional fishing communities stranded. Protein sources vanish, and diets shift toward cheaper, processed alternatives. This triggers a silent epidemic of malnutrition. Children in coastal areas once nourished by fish suffer from stunting, anemia, and cognitive decline. Pregnant women experience complications linked to nutrient deficiencies. At the same time, crop yields drop as extreme heat and erratic rainfall stress agricultural systems. The result is a perfect storm: less food, poorer quality, and more mouths to feed. Malnutrition spreads like an invisible contagion, weakening immune systems and making people more vulnerable to infections that thrive in the new, hotter world. Mental health deteriorates alongside physical health. Each stage of ocean-driven disruption, failed harvests, lost fisheries, displacement from floods, deepens anxiety and despair. Farmers and fishers who have depended on predictable seasons find themselves helpless as those rhythms collapse. The psychological toll becomes its own epidemic: rising rates of depression, post-traumatic stress, and suicide in communities that once found stability in nature's cycles. Hospitals and clinics are not equipped for this slow erosion of hope. There are no vaccines against despair. Yet it grows in step with the ocean's heat, a parallel crisis often ignored in climate discussions. The flow of impacts continues to move through the economy and back into health. Heat reduces labor productivity and increases workplace accidents. Families lose income and access to healthcare, forcing them to delay treatment or rely on unsafe water and food sources. The poor become trapped in a cycle of heat exposure, infection, and hunger, each feeding the next. Urban heat islands amplify the danger, and coastal flooding displaces millions, creating crowded conditions where diseases spread quickly. The ocean's warming has turned into a conveyor belt of vulnerability. Every wave, every storm, every drought pulling more people into medical and nutritional crisis. What makes this cascade so dangerous is that it is largely invisible until the final stage. Policymakers may see temperature graphs and think the danger is distant, but by the time the signal reaches the doctor's office, it has already passed through every layer of the environment. Each hospital admission, each waterborne outbreak, each malnourished child is the endpoint of a planetary system under stress. And these are not isolated tragedies. They are the health expression of climate imbalance. The warning is brutally clear. Ocean heat is not a passive statistic or a remote scientific curiosity. It is an active driver of disease, hunger, and mortality. As the seas continue to release the energy they have stored, the world will face an accelerating sequence of health crises that no single country can contain. The only way to interrupt the flow, from deep ocean to doctor's office, is to cool the system itself, to reduce emissions, restore ecosystems, and prepare medical infrastructure for a hotter, less predictable planet. Without that intervention, hospitals will continue to absorb the symptoms of an illness that medicine alone cannot cure. Humanity's health now mirrors the ocean's condition, unstable, fevered, and gasping for relief.